Being accused of trying to censor the news coverage of U.S. forces, journalists have expressed outrage at a scheme that screens reporters. Hacks wanting to accompany troops first have their previous work rated in terms of how positive it's been. And for more on this, let's go live to Washington, D.C. and now our correspondent there, Priya Sridhar. Hello there, Priya. So, what can you tell us?
Thanks. Well, the United States has always boasted about being the land of the free, but some recent news seems to put that into question. U.S. public affairs officers in Afghanistan have reportedly said that journalists seeking to embed with military units will be subject to a background check by a public relations firm. Now, the PR firm would look at a reporter's previous work to see if they put the United States in a positive or negative light. Now, the public affairs officers say that they're simply looking at this information to find out what kind of reporter they're dealing with. But others say that this raises some serious doubts as to how free the press really is. And many wonder why the military is trying to censor the message that's getting put out there. Well, joining me to discuss this is Amy Mitchell, Deputy Director for the Project for Excellence in Journalism. Amy, thanks so much for joining me. First of all, can you tell me what you think about why they're using this PR firm to do background checks?
Well, clearly the military has a vested interest in the information that comes out about what's happening with the war in Afghanistan, and in particular what the U.S. is doing there. One of the things that this demonstrates is the tricky relationship that exists now in covering foreign wars. The U.S. media is very dependent upon the military, which is an arm of the U.S. government, to get them into certain places and to protect them, to make sure they stay alive when they go in to cover certain things. And so the journalists are dependent on the military to be able to get there, to be able to get information, and the military has a very vested interest in that information, how it gets reported and what gets said.
And are you aware of any reporters being denied access because of a background check?
I am not aware of any, and I think it would be, probably hard to prove if somebody was trying to do that, to say that, there was a background check and therefore a reporter wasn't allowed to get in.
And, the United States has always slammed other countries for censoring their media or controlling messages that are being put out there. But is this really any different?
It is different. And my understanding is that the military is not seeing any reporting before it goes to press. So that when reporters, they're working and they're filing a story, they don't show it to any of the military commanders first. That's my understanding of it. So there's no censorship as far as that goes, and nobody's telling the military what you can what the journalists can or cannot report. There is a question about whether there's some favorability given to journalists that put the military perhaps in a better light. But again, there's no evidence that that's taking place. What we know is that they're looking at the reporting itself.
Do you think that the reporters will be able to do their job properly, or do you think they might feel any pressure knowing that their work might be categorized later on, depending on what they write or air?
It makes it very difficult. Certainly, the reporter has to be able to distance him or herself from this relationship, from the embeddedness of their program, to say, I'm here to report on a certain event, and I've got to separate the people that I'm relying on to get me there. It's a very difficult situation. Part of what has put the media in this place is the fact that most of them no longer have established foreign bureaus in many of these countries where journalists are living day in and day out when there's a wartime and when there's not a wartime. So they do not have an established community in these countries like they used to.
And has this happened before in other war times, or is it simply kind of another sign of the recession, like you said, the fact that a lot of these media outlets are closing their foreign bureaus?
It began to happen before the recession, as the journalists began focusing more on U.S., wanting to devote fewer dollars to some of their foreign reporting. The embed program began with the coverage with the war in Iraq, and it was actually an idea of one of the women that was in the military at the time, and the journalists needed to get there. They had no idea how they were going to try to cover Iraq because they knew that they couldn't afford to station somebody over there to take the safety precautions that were necessary, and didn't have any way of getting in to get the news.
Well, it's certainly an interesting discussion, and we'll continue to keep you updated on how this actually affects reporters out in the field. But for now, back to